Are you new to prepping? Does long-term food storage and all the different options confuse you? This is the video for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how to store your food long-term and what you need to store. Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene, and today this is Newbie Prep step number 9, which means for those of you that have been following us, there are a total of 10 steps, and you are almost through. This is super exciting. For those of you who'd like to know more, go to our website, theprovidentprepper.org, and just search for Newbie Prep Steps. And there's a post in there that has homework assignments and links to all of the videos that we've created for each one of these steps. But hopefully these steps are intended to take the newbie prepper step by step through this process so that you can be prepared, because life is looking just a little bit crazy out there. So today our focus is on long-term food storage. We've already done building your short-term food supply, and we recommend that you have at least a 3-month supply of everyday food so that you could just open your pantry and for 3 months eat like you normally eat from the foods that you have stored. And so go back and check out that video. There's all kinds of different ways to accomplish that. And you don't have to limit it to 3 months. Quite frankly, if you wanted to do 6 months or a year, that's just fine too. You just have to be really good at rotating. When we talk about a shelf life, so the short-term food supply, you could store those anywhere between 2 and 7 years. But they're not going to store for 25 or 30 years. But the foods we're going to talk about today will. In this video, we're going to talk about why we eat, right? Why it's important. What happens if you don't have the right nutrients and the balance that's important. How much you should probably store, how to best store it, and how to package it so that you can get the longest shelf life. So let's get going on that. First of all, why do we eat? Well, the first reason why we eat is for calories, so that we actually have the energy to be able to move. So how many calories you have stored makes a difference. But the other thing is nutrition, because if you don't have the right nutrition, it doesn't matter how many calories you have, you're not going to be healthy and you're not going to be productive. For instance, sugar has a lot of calories, but if all you eat is sugar, you are really quickly going to develop vitamin deficiencies and have all kinds of different things happen. So we've got to watch that nutritional balance. And then another one is comfort. And I think this is really underrated. People don't talk about it. They're just like, oh, you know, you're going to eat whatever and you just need to be tough and be grateful for whatever you have. But think about how many of your memories and your good feelings revolve around your food and memories of food. And when life is really hard, if you can have some of those comfort foods, it just makes all the difference, right? And those comfort foods are different for everybody. For some people, it could be a nice hot loaf of bread, others soup. For me, it's chocolate. Or how about those home-baked cookies? All kinds of different things, but you need to think about what it is for you. And the fourth reason why we eat is just pleasure. Sometimes food just tastes so good. And so let's think about that as we do this. So first let's talk about the caloric. And there was a study, it's called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. In World War II, there was mass starvation, and there were just thousands of people dying from starvation because they didn't have enough to eat, right? And so they had decided to create this study and they took, I think it was 36 healthy men, it was in 1945, and they decided to feed them what all of the people that were suffering would be able to eat, what they would have access to, so that they could kind of find a solution. So they took these 36 men and they first started them off with a control diet that had 3,200 calories a day. But then during the study period, they reduced those calories to 1,570, and they had to walk 22 miles a week because they figured that that best represented the population that they were trying to study. And it was kind of crazy what happened to these poor guys. They lost massive amounts of weight, but they had all kinds of physical issues happening to them. Things like they were always cold, they couldn't think straight. There was just this huge list. So we want to make sure that we have enough calories. But in this study, they fed them, it was really a high carbohydrate diet with potatoes, rutabagas, turnips, whole wheat bread, and macaroni, because those are the kinds of foods that were readily available. And when you think about it, a lot of times that's what preppers store, right, are the high carbohydrates. So we learned from this study some of the things that were missing from the diet. But one thing that's really important to note is that everything was delicious. All these guys, when they were able to eat, everything was delicious. There was no diet fatigue. Sometimes people say, well, if all you have to eat is wheat, you're gonna get tired of it and people will die before they'll eat it. Well, there was no evidence of that in this study. One of the other things that they found was that these guys would take whatever they were given and they would add water to it so that it was more like soups, so that they could, it would satisfy them, right? It would fill up their tummy for longer. So that's another thing that when you're really hungry, you might think about doing is adding some water. But so this is, the basis is we need to have a diet that has enough calories and nutrition so that we don't end up with like these guys. Let's begin by talking about the foods that are good candidates for long-term storage. They would be low in moisture, 10% or less, and low in oils, because things that are high fat will go rancid in storage. So let's compare white rice to brown rice. While brown rice is significantly higher in nutrition, white rice stores a lot longer because it doesn't have the fat in it. If you go, I'll leave a link to a website where you can go and explore the foods and what their moisture content is. So make sure that you look for that link in the description. To meet all the nutrition that you might need, with the exception of protein, you could store wheat, rice, pasta, dry milk, oats, and beans. And that would give you pretty much everything that you have to have except for vitamin A and vitamin C. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important to grow a garden, because those vitamins are a bit more fragile. You could fix that through supplements or through freeze-dried. There aren't very many dried foods that will maintain their vitamin C. You can definitely store dried, dehydrated foods, and some of them will store for a long time, but they have to be dry enough to snap in order to be good candidates for the long-term food storage. Could you plant some berry bushes? Wow, that would be a great source of vitamin A and vitamin C, or maybe some fruit trees. Anything that's perennial that grows back over and over again, there's more of a guarantee that you're gonna have what you need when you need it if you're growing that. The vegetable garden, fantastic idea. Okay, so let's talk about how much you need. So for one adult, now males need more calories than females, right? But we're just going to average this out and say we're shooting for a 2,000 calorie diet. Now, quite frankly, that's probably not really enough, because during a disaster scenario, the chances are that you are going to be expending more energy just to be able to live. But we're just going to base this on a 2,000 calorie diet. So 300 pounds of grain and 60 pounds of legumes would be enough for a starvation rations for one person, one adult, for a year. If you do that and you had, say, wheat and beans, you could bake 3/4 of a loaf of bread and 1 cup of cooked beans per day. And you think about that, and that's actually not a lot of food. It's definitely not a lot of variety, but it is possible to do that. Now, if you say you don't have space to store this, quite frankly, just underneath a twin-size bed. These number 10 cans, they fit really well. My favorite place to buy basics is actually from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have what they call home storage centers in various places throughout the United States. And it's the best price on basics. They don't have anything fancy. They just have like the wheat and the rolled oats and the dry beans and some of those basics like that. And you can purchase them in these cases of 6. Well, 12 of those cases will fit nicely underneath a twin-size bed. If you get the right stuff, those 12 cans could be enough to sustain that one adult for an entire year. Brigham Young University has done a study, and in this study, I'll leave a link to this. In fact, there's a really, really good article that we wrote on this, a post in our website, theprovidentprepper.org. And I highly recommend, I'll leave a link to it, but it goes through everything that is recommended by these different people, and I think it's a good place to start. So, but BYU, for 2,000 to 2,400 calorie per day diet, you had to have more, right? It was 400 and something pounds. And then TACTA recommends a diet that has 2,700 calories. That's the American Civil Defense Association. And in that post, we list out exactly like how much corn they say to have and all this. But the diet needs to be tailored to you personally. But just remember that those beans are really important, because that's the only real protein in your long-term storage. You've got small amounts of protein in some of these other grains, but pretty much it's overall very, very high in carbohydrates. And so we've got to have some of that protein. Let's talk a little bit about adding some protein. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. And like we talked about the beans, but some of them just, you would be better off if you had a more concentrated protein. When we look at these, this is packaged. This is chicken, diced chicken. It's been freeze-dried. It's in this can, and it's packaged for a 20-25 year shelf life. These are whole freeze-dried eggs, which are from Harvest Right, and these are packaged for a 25 year shelf life. I actually freeze-dry a lot of our own eggs, and I put them in mason jars. I'm not intending on those having a 25 year shelf life. I'm looking at around 10, right? I want to make sure that I keep those rotated. But we've got some more concentrated protein. Milk has protein in it, but one of my favorite ways to have protein, other than freeze-dried meats are really, really good, is just cans. Now, these cans, they'll have the best if used by date that's out a couple of years, but quite frankly, you've got at least 7 years. If you store these in a cool, dry place, right? If you store them in your garage in Phoenix, you're not gonna have that long of a shelf life. But the other thing about some of these canned proteins is that you can just rotate through them, right? You can make regular meals with them so that you can always have a fresh stock. Okay, so we need a balanced diet, right? If you're just gonna store white rice, it's not okay. You've gotta have that balanced nutrition. And that's one of the reasons why storing wheat is actually a good idea, because it has some of the nutrition in it that some of the other foods don't have. So there are 8 things that you need to take into consideration. They're enemies to your food storage. And I'll leave a link to this article. There's also a video on it. But the things that degrade your food storage, because we want high quality, which means better vitamins, right? Better nutrition, better taste, just everything all around. The first is air. So that is one of the reasons, well, that's one of the main reasons why we package things in an airtight container with an oxygen absorber, because oxygen will degrade your food, right? And so if you put an oxygen absorber in it and seal it up in some type of a container that doesn't allow the oxygen to permeate it, you're gonna get a longer shelf life. The second is chemical contamination. You don't ever want to store your food in your garage next to a gasoline or near chlorine or something like that where you could actually contaminate your food. The third is insects. Now we're back to the oxygen absorbers, because if I put an oxygen absorber inside of my airtight container, it makes it so the insects can't grow, right? No oxygen, no life. And then the fourth is light. So this can, there's no problem with light, right? Because the light can't penetrate a number 10 can. But in this container, we could definitely have a problem, because light will degrade the food. So this has to be stored in a dark place. The next one is moisture. And moisture is just super bad for food. And moisture can degrade your container. So if you have a basement that has high humidity, definitely you're gonna have some problems, and you need to make sure to take care of that. If you live in a very humid area and you're packaging your food storage, you could get moisture in it. So you want to be careful to make sure that you're not doing anything that would introduce moisture in. Now, there's the question of using desiccant packets with oxygen absorbers. And the problem, well, first of all, if you put a desiccant packet in with moist food, it's not going to reduce the moisture of that food. The only thing that it can do is take some of the moisture out of the air that's being packaged in there. But the problem is the oxygen absorber needs a slight amount of moisture to be able to work. If you put a desiccant packet in with an oxygen absorber in the same package, it could make it so the oxygen absorber doesn't work. If you feel super strongly that you need to do that, I would put like the desiccant in the bottom or the top of the bucket and the oxygen absorber, you know, one or the other. Don't put them next to each other. Personally, I don't really think that you should use a desiccant package when you package your food storage. You should get dry food storage and package it on a good dry day. The next one is rodents. Rodents can totally destroy your food storage. Now, this number 10 can, pretty safe from rodents, right? It is possible that it could have a problem, but for the most part, it's okay. Rodents could chew through this very, very quickly. So you want to make sure that you keep your area rodent free and that you package it. So with these, like these actually all go in this bucket. Could a rodent chew through that bucket? It's possible. However, if you control your rodents around, it's not really likely. We have some cats and that seems to be very effective for us. The next one is temperature, and that is so important. We talked about the Arizona garage. If I store any of this, like this is supposed to have a 25-year shelf life, but every 10-degree drop in temperature doubles the shelf life of a seed. So think about that when it comes to food storage. The lower the temperature, the better and the longer your food storage is going to last with the quality, right? But there's a few things that you need to know about that. With these cans, these cannot freeze. Well, they can freeze, but what'll happen if they freeze is that you can get some damage to the seal and introduce some contaminants in there, and it could go bad. So you don't ever want your canned foods to get frozen. But things like this bucket of I'm not sure what's in there, rice, that bucket of rice or that Mylar bag with rice in it or the can of oats, freezing isn't gonna hurt it. It can freeze and thaw and freeze and thaw and they will be just fine. So the lower the temperature, the better off you're gonna be. So if you have to store your food inside your home and you're just at room temperature, it's not gonna have as nice of a shelf life as if you're storing it in a root cellar at 40 degrees. It's just not. But is it still okay? Yeah, totally okay. Just know you'll need to rotate a little bit sooner. And the last enemy to your food storage is time. The longer you store it, the lower the quality. So that's where rotation comes in. We want to rotate through our food storage. And when you rotate it, that means that the first thing that you buy is the first thing that you eat, right? First in, first out. There's all kinds of different ways to rotate your food, but it's really, really important because the higher the newer the food is, the higher the quality, the higher the nutrition. Got it? Let's talk about packaging your food storage. Now, first of all, let me be clear. You do not need to repackage everything that you get for long-term storage. Some of that doesn't make sense at all. For instance, this can of meat, this is perfect to just sit on my shelf and be okay. But there are some foods that it really makes sense to repackage and extend the shelf life. And so we're gonna talk about some of the different ways that you can do that. Now, you can just buy foods that are already packaged and ready to go. We talked about the cheapest place was from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their online home storage center, or their home storage centers, but you can also pay a little bit more and just purchase them online and they'll ship them pretty much anywhere you live. I know in the United States, I'm not sure about some of the other countries, they don't. I don't know what's going on with Canada, but you could definitely go to the site. I'll leave a link. And that's just one of the cheapest places. But there are great other places to buy food storage. It just costs a little bit more. So you could get it all prepackaged and not worry about it. We're going to talk about some of these prepackaged stuff in just a minute. But you can put it in Mylar bags. The one drawback to Mylar is that it's very susceptible to rodents. So I always either store it inside of a bucket or inside of a really sturdy plastic tote, like the kind that you get at Costco. I know some people store them in used kitty litter buckets. If you have it in Mylar, you don't need to worry that the bucket is food grade. Now, if the bucket had paint in it, I'm not gonna put my food in it. But you don't have to worry about a food grade bucket as long as it hasn't held something toxic. You can just put this in there because the food's not gonna touch it. Now, there are some less expensive ways to do that. So this is a pickle jar. And I washed it out really well. You have to worry about the pickle smell, right? You have to work to get rid of it. But there's an oxygen absorber in the bottom. And now I've got flour stored in here, right? And these are mason jars. Same thing, put an oxygen absorber, filled it up, sealed it, labeled it. It's good to go. These have to be protected from light, and you have the risk of earthquake damage, right? Of breakage. And so everything has a positive and a negative. So nothing's perfect. And sometimes it's good to diversify your food storage. Now, these are plastic, I call them plastic peat bottles. There's a #1 recycling symbol on the bottom of them. This is actually from 2006 on my storage. And what I do is I put an oxygen absorber in the bottom because you kind of have to, like this one, this is a little bit rough because the neck is they're a little bit rough to clean out. You have to clean them super, super well and let them air dry for several days because any moisture that's left in here could be a bad thing. So you want to let them air dry for a long time. And with this cap, I take the little, sometimes there's a little thing inside that cap and I take it out because sometimes that harbors the bacteria. But think about it, you could reuse pop bottles. This is an apple juice bottle, just oxygen absorber, you can see it there in the bottom. This is a juice bottle. And this is just another juice bottle, right? Things that always get thrown away. Now, this is I think it's from Costco. Anyway, this had peanuts in it. And this one isn't as good as the juice bottles. These were all intended to hold liquid. And so the plastic is just nice and thick. And the lids tend to be more airtight. But you can use these. But this is actually duct tape. And the reason why I've put this on is because sometimes you don't get a good seal with these lids that aren't intended to hold moisture. But this will totally work, right? And then my only cost associated with this is the cost of an oxygen absorber. We've got a video on how to store food storage dry goods in plastic bottles, glass jars, and Mylar. There are separate videos and posts on all of this, so there's no guessing. We teach you everything you need to know. And then this is a bucket. I love it because we reuse these buckets. With the buckets, I don't buy any more that are this big. I think this is the 6-gallon bucket. It's too heavy for me now that I'm getting older. And so that's something to think about. The 5-gallon, I can manage better. And then there's the even smaller ones that are even nicer to manage. But these, if you're having an issue with weight, any size cans like these, sometimes as we get older or if we've got some problems, it's just nice to have the smaller containers. So think about that when you're building your food storage, because this one is heavy. Now this one has a Mylar bag inside of it. So we put the Mylar bag in, then we dump the food storage in, right? This one's rice, and it has an oxygen absorber in it. And then we kind of try and squeeze out the air, and then we heat seal the top of it, and we squish it all in here, and then we pound this lid back on. This bucket has been used several different times. And that's one of the nice things. I like to repurpose things as much as possible. It's just me. I like to do that. And so that's one of the reasons why these buckets work really well. Now, if you don't want to use the Mylar liner, you don't have to. It will reduce the shelf life because plastic is permeable. Oxygen over time will get through the walls of this. So the guy that we buy our wheat from, he actually packages it in a bucket just like this with just oxygen absorbers and puts the lid on. And so that's how our wheat is packaged. So it's not gonna store as long as if we put the Mylar bag liner in because that creates a true oxygen barrier and it protects the contents better. Okay, let's talk for just a minute about commercially packaged food storage plans. Now, they can be really good if you are a smart shopper, because there's a lot of deception that goes on with the advertisement of these types of products. And so you've got to be really careful that you understand exactly what you're getting. Remember how we talked about how it's important to have at least 2,000 calories per day? Well, it's also important you know where those calories are coming from. For instance, are the calories in this plan all coming from added sugar, right? Did they put milk, powdered milk in the package, or did they just put like Kool-Aid kind of stuff high in sugar? There's one's gonna have a lot different nutritional component than the other, so you've got to be really careful. One of the tricks that they do a lot is they say, oh, this has like 90 servings. But think about what size a serving is. You know, with 3 servings a day, when's the last time you ate 3 servings a day, right? We eat more than 3 servings in a meal. So just be super, super careful that you really pay attention. Now, I like Valley Food Storage. I think that, okay, so I'm very sensitive to different chemicals. I don't like things that are high sugar. And not saying they don't have any sugar in them, but because they do. But it's cleaner than a lot of the other food storage plans that you'll have. So this bucket is, and they were actually really good about this because it's a 175 serving long-term food storage kit, and it retails for about $380. But they're not trying to deceive you. On here it says 14 days of 1,500 calories, or 11 days of 2,000 calories. So you kind of know exactly what you're getting. Now this is by Ready Hour, and this is significantly less expensive. So this bucket, let me move all this over here. This bucket is a 2-week supply. There we go. And there isn't quite as much stuff in here, but it's advertised as a 2,000 calorie per day for 2 weeks. But so this is a very different kind of food than this one. This one's significantly less expensive. This one has a greater variety, and it has more nutrition in it because there's more fruits and vegetables. There's some real meat in here. And it depends, you know, all on, because they will substitute whatever, and I'm sure that's why there's not an orange drink in here, because they'll substitute depending on what's available at the time, but it should all still kind of be well-rounded. So if you want to do this kind of food storage, you know, go for it. We will leave a link to both of these, but just be careful you know what you're getting. Don't think that because you have this bucket that you really have what you think you have, right? Make sure, and taste it. Maybe you're not gonna like some of this food, and if you're like me and react to some of the foods, you've gotta be really careful. So, that was a whole lot, right? Long-term food storage, it's really important in the fact that no matter what happens, no matter how long an event lasts, whether it's the economy or a drought, or we're seeing lots of food shortages going on right now. No matter how long it lasts, if you have prepared, you're gonna be okay. This is an expensive way to prepare. Some of these other ones, like this, wow, you can store some good food for really inexpensive. However you decide to do this, it's super important that you do it, right? That you have some food stored for your family. And think about the members of your family. Like if you have somebody like me who normally eats a whole food diet, okay, that's why we have a freeze dryer, because I need to store really clean meats, and I need to store lots of fruits and vegetables so that I can remain healthy, because I'll get sick really fast if I don't have the kinds of foods that I need. So I hope that was helpful. Definitely look for the links under this video. I will pin them in the comments, and I will leave them in the description, or go to the providentprepper.org, Newbie Prep Steps, And it'll go through all these and it'll have links to all the articles, so all you have to do is click on them. But now is the time. Well, last year would have been a better time. It would have been cheaper last year, but now is a really good time while we still have food available to stock up and build your supply. Don't go crazy, don't hoard food, right? We want to make sure that you buy the foods that you're gonna eat, right? And like right now, I don't have to go out and buy much because I've been stocking up a little bit over time. And that's a really good way to do it, a little bit over time. And now for the question of the day. What is your favorite food that you have in your long-term food supply? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.